A human male entered the medical facility with a barely contained grimace on his face. His posture was stiff, and his eyes darted nervously around the high-tech examination room, as if he were trying to avoid something he wasn't prepared to face. Standing at the counter, he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, before finally mumbling under his breath. I need some help, Doc. It's about my condition." He shifted awkwardly, his gaze flicking downward, though he made no attempt to explain further. The alien nurse behind the counter blinked slowly, a high-pitched hum of digital scans and unfamiliar languages playing in the background. Her species, Zycrians, didn't exactly have a reputation for emotional warmth or physical intimacy, but they were known for their precision in medical fields. Her 3 sets of eyes, designed for perfect vision in both the visible and infrared spectrums, locked onto the human with a clinical focus. "I am Nurse Lyra. How may I assist?" she asked, her voice devoid of warmth, but professional, almost robotic. The man shifted again, his face flushing a deeper shade of red. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, well, it's this swelling. Down there." He motioned vaguely toward his crotch area, an awkward and half-embarrassed gesture. Lyra's eyebrows raised, an instinctive, alien reaction that she immediately suppressed. Swelling? Between the legs? This was new. She quickly scanned her mental database for any similar human medical conditions. Her race had dealt with almost every known physical ailment in the galaxy, but humans? They were often a puzzle. Swelling. Between the legs? She repeated, her tone flat but inquisitive. Describe the sensation. The human hesitated again, and Lyra's finely tuned diagnostic senses detected a spike in his pheromone levels, suggesting nervousness or embarrassment. She shifted slightly, her 3 sets of eyes narrowing in what she believed was a gesture of consideration. "Right," he muttered, clearly uncomfortable. It's sort of not painful, exactly. But it's there. And, it's big." He gave her a sheepish look, trying to meet her gaze but failing. "I mean, it's swollen." Lyra processed this new information. Big swelling? Not painful? This was something entirely foreign to her species. A quick mental scan of human anatomy didn't reveal any records of similar conditions. Her species didn't experience things like sexual arousal, let alone physical swelling caused by it. But she had been trained in dealing with human biology. Or at least, she thought she had. "I see," she said, stepping toward him with the smooth, robotic movements her species was known for. "Please remove your clothing so I may inspect the swelling." The human froze for a moment, a panicked look crossing his face. "Wait, no. I mean, no need for that. It's not like it's not that kind of thing." His voice trailed off awkwardly, and he gestured vaguely. "It's not like a disease or anything." Lyra tilted her head, confusion clearly written on her face. "You are suggesting the swelling is not a disease?" she asked, repeating his words back to him, trying to make sense of the situation. "No, it's not that," he replied quickly, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, it's my body's doing something. It's been like this for a while now." He gulped. "It's just embarrassing." Lyra's multiple eyes locked onto his face, processing every word, every shift in his posture. She was almost certain that whatever was happening to this human wasn't a typical physical ailment. Her people didn't experience such things, but her mind raced to draw conclusions. "Well," she said, tilting her head to the side in an attempt to understand, "I will need to conduct a more thorough examination. I suggest full physical inspection." The human blushed even more, visibly distressed by the idea of further exposure. He stammered, trying to form coherent words. No, I mean, you don't need to do that." His hands flew up defensively. "It's just, look, it's like a human thing, all right? It's natural, it's Lyra stood still for a moment, clearly perplexed, before something flickered across her face. Her species, after all, was composed of highly intelligent beings with vast knowledge of the universe, yet somehow, This very basic human condition seemed to elude her. Is this natural? She asked, raising her head slightly, a touch of genuine curiosity creeping into her tone. The human's face was practically crimson now, but there was an underlying tension that spoke of both embarrassment and something else, a sense of discomfort mixed with desperation. Yeah, he managed, his voice shaking slightly. It's a human thing. Happens sometimes, when we get turned on. He winced as he spoke, cringing at the admission. I mean, I can't help it, alright? I don't want it to happen, but it does. Slyra blinked several times, each of her eyes independently processing this new piece of information. Turned on? She had never encountered the concept before. In Zikrian culture, physical attraction was a purely intellectual and emotional bond, something far more subtle than what the human was describing. The entire situation was rapidly moving beyond her comprehension. Turned on? She repeated, her tone flat, as she attempted to understand this strange human reaction. This is not a disease? This is natural behavior? The human sighed, shoulders slumping in resignation. Yes. It's natural, he repeated, looking anywhere but at her. It's an erection. It's a human thing. An erection? Slyra blinked again, now utterly baffled. She could feel her mind grinding to a halt as she tried to process this new concept. Erection? Was that a term for some sort of alien disease? She'd heard of things like growths and mutations, but this? For a long moment she stood there, lost in her thoughts, as the human fidgeted nervously, clearly hoping she'd figure it out and somehow solve the problem. Slyra's hands twitched as she considered her options. I see, she said at last, trying to maintain her professional composure. And this condition is a result of what exactly? A physiological malfunction? The human groaned, wishing he could disappear. No! It's not a malfunction, it's just part of being human. He glanced up at her, embarrassment still plastered across his face. It's not something I can control. Slyra, her clinical mind working overtime, began to wonder if there was a cure for this condition. She considered possible solutions. Could a mind-altering treatment be applied to humans to suppress this erection? Was there a way to deflate it with her advanced technology? Could she neutralize the human reaction with some form of medical intervention? Her hands twitched again. She opened her mouth, about to suggest one of these methods, when the human shot her a panicked look. No, no! He interrupted, practically pleading. You can't just fix it with some kind of medicine, all right? It's not that kind of thing. Slyra paused, trying to grasp what he meant. He was telling her this was normal. This was expected? Finally, Slyra, determined to resolve this confusion once and for all, crossed her arms and fixed him with her gaze. Well, she said, her voice entirely neutral, you will need to explain this human behavior in more detail. I must understand this better before proceeding. The human sighed again, his body language screaming frustration. All right, fine, he muttered, his tone barely above a whisper. It's about sexual arousal. You know, when humans get, attracted to something or someone. He paused, then added quickly. It's not a disease, okay? Slyra's eyes widened as she began to understand. Sexual arousal. Attraction. The pieces of the puzzle slowly clicked into place, but now, a new set of questions emerged. Her clinical mind raced. What was she supposed to do with this knowledge? This was nothing like her species' emotions, and she couldn't help but wonder how far this particular condition could go. The man shifted again, clearly not prepared for the level of scrutiny his swelling was about to undergo. He swallowed nervously, clearly torn between wanting to maintain some sense of dignity and the inevitability of having to explain it. Well, he began. It's not like a medical thing, you know? It's, just been swelling up. I don't think it's anything dangerous. I mean, unless it is, but... His voice trailed off as he shifted uncomfortably on the examination table. Slyra's head tilted slightly, her curiosity growing. You believe it to be non-threatening, yet you seek medical assistance? The human man scratched the back of his head. Well, I don't know what to do about it. It's not like the kind of swelling I'd expect after an injury. And, it's been happening for a while. I thought it might go away on its own. Slyra processed this information, noting the ambiguity of his symptoms. It seems you do not fully understand the cause of this swelling. I must examine the area to assess it properly. The human's eyes widened, and he raised both hands in a panic. Wait. Not like that. It's, not, you don't need to get all up close and personal. He swallowed hard, a bead of sweat forming on his brow. Maybe I could just, explain it a bit more? We don't need to go through with any of that stuff. Slyra's head tilted again, processing his body language, and she caught a faint spike in his pheromones once more. It wasn't like anything she had encountered before. His heartbeat was erratic, and his blood pressure was higher than usual. She could also detect an unfamiliar scent in the air, one that made her feel uncomfortable. What was this human reaction? She had no medical record to explain it. Human males emit various pheromones when experiencing stress. It is noted in your species' medical literature, but I did not anticipate such an intensity in response to simple medical questions. Slyra's voice remained neutral, though internally, she was beginning to feel a wave of confusion. The man flushed again, looking like he might bolt for the door any second. He was visibly embarrassed, his entire body language screaming discomfort. He rubbed his hands together, then shifted in place, clearly wanting to be anywhere but here. I mean, it's not dangerous, he muttered. It's just, it's a normal human thing, right? Slyra's expression remained passive, though her mind raced. Normal? The way he was speaking indicated something deeper. The idea of normal was ambiguous to her. Alien medical standards were based on cold, clinical objectivity. She didn't know what normal meant in a human context, especially not when it came to human anatomy. Please elaborate. Normal human thing is not sufficient data for diagnosis, Slyra said, her voice sharpening ever so slightly with impatience. Is it external swelling, internal? Is there pain, irritation, tenderness? Answer the question, please. The human winced, and she noted the subtle changes in his body language, the fidgeting, the way he kept looking away, his hands shifting uncomfortably over his lap. It was as if he was struggling to find the words. Look, I'm just not used to talking about this kind of thing with, anyone, he stammered. It's not like I'm, dying or anything. Slyra paused, trying to reframe the situation. Her mind was still struggling with the concept of the problem. Could swelling in this area be something akin to a glandular issue, a defect? She wasn't sure, but her medical instincts told her this was something different. You are experiencing swelling in a reproductive organ, yes? She asked, her voice flat. She had assumed this was what he meant by swelling, but she was still unsure. Human biology was complicated and quite alien to her people. The man froze. His eyes went wide, and his face instantly reddened again. Yeah, well, kinda, but not really, he said, barely able to form a coherent thought. It's more like, a natural response to certain, stimuli. Slyra's eyebrows furrowed. Stimuli? Her 3 sets of eyes locked on him with the intensity of a magnifying glass on an ant under a hot sun. Explain. Is this response triggered by external forces, or is it a natural malfunction? It's... The human hesitated, rubbing his hands together nervously. Look, it's something that happens when, you're thinking about stuff. Like certain, things. It's not a sickness or anything, just, normal. Slyra's mind raced. Thinking about what? The man visibly cringed, clearly on the edge of total mortification. He tried to push out the words, but they were sticking to the back of his throat like they had formed into some kind of solid mass. He sighed and looked at her, a mixture of frustration and embarrassment in his eyes. Okay, fine, he muttered. It's when I, get aroused. When I think about, sexy stuff. Slyra blinked once, twice. The concept seemed entirely alien to her. This was not something she could comprehend, let alone diagnose. In her culture, arousal was something that occurred only for reproductive purposes, and even then, it was strictly controlled and devoid of emotion. She had read about human sexuality, but now that it was being explained in such blunt terms, it felt strange, like trying to understand a foreign language she hadn't learned. So, your swelling occurs when you, She hesitated. When you are sexually stimulated? The human nodded, his face now a crimson hue. Yeah. Exactly. It's a thing that happens. A normal part of being human. Slyra didn't know how to process this. Her medical data had never included sexual arousal as a physiological condition. It was illogical. Her people's biology was far removed from this type of reaction. She tried to respond, but the words felt inadequate, so she simply looked at the human in stunned silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she cleared her throat, her voice still neutral but now tinged with an undertone of uncertainty. Human sexuality is far more complicated than I anticipated. I will need to adjust my approach accordingly. The human let out a nervous laugh, realizing that perhaps, just perhaps, the alien nurse was just as uncomfortable with this situation as he was. He sat back in the chair, scratching his head in a futile attempt to regain some composure. Yeah, welcome to the club. I don't think this is something anyone gets used to. Slyra's analytical mind raced as she considered the situation. She had encountered countless alien species with bizarre and complex biological issues, but this was different. The human in front of her was clearly uncomfortable, but she couldn't discern the cause of his agitation. It wasn't physical pain, but something deeper, more emotional. The scent in the air was unmistakable now, an odd mix of anxiety and arousal. She could almost hear his thoughts, desperately trying to avoid this medical examination, but why? Was the swelling a private matter? A self-diagnosed condition? Or was it something entirely alien to him? Human, she said, maintaining her clinical demeanor. I am here to help you. If there is a problem with your anatomy, it must be examined properly. You must be prepared for this. The man fidgeted, looking anywhere but directly at her. His hands were clenched tightly, and his eyes flicked nervously toward the door. It's just. I don't need anything fancy. Just, something simple. Something to make it go down. Slyra blinked, processing. You want it to go down? Is it a case of internal swelling? Are you experiencing discomfort in your internal systems? No. No. The man groaned, frustrated. It's like it swells, and then it goes down. But it happens again, and I don't know why. It's not a big deal. Just don't get all medical about it. She couldn't contain her confusion. She could sense he was embarrassed. His body language practically screamed it, but she couldn't understand why. He wasn't in physical distress, yet he was acting as if his anatomy was a forbidden secret. Slyra's species didn't experience modesty the same way humans did. Nudity wasn't taboo. Physical examinations were routinely conducted without any of the nervousness or shame that she sensed now. Explain to me. Slyra pressed gently, her tone still professional. Why this is causing such distress? Your condition is not dangerous, and I do not see the need for concern. The man stopped himself. His face flushed again, but this time, there was a spark of irritation behind his embarrassment. He sighed, clearly at the end of his patience. Look, I'm a guy, okay? And guys, well, we get these reactions sometimes. And when it happens, things get a little stiff, if you know what I mean. Slyra's eyes narrowed. Stiff? Are you saying your body is experiencing some form of rigidity? How long has this been happening? No. The man groaned in frustration. Not rigid, it's like, it gets swollen. It's normal, alright? It's just part of being a man. You really don't need to go digging into it, seriously. Zlyra remained silent, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. She scanned through her mental database again, but nothing fit. Nothing in her knowledge base described this human condition properly. As an alien nurse, she had experience dealing with a variety of anatomical quirks from species far and wide, but this was something else entirely. Human, Zlyra said, her voice no longer entirely neutral. You are telling me this swelling is a natural phenomenon? She wasn't sure whether she should be irritated or intrigued. This was far beyond the scope of her training. The human looked at her with an incredulous expression. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's a biological thing. Happens to all of us. I'm just saying it's, nothing to get worked up over. Zlyra's eyes widened as something clicked in her mind. You are aroused? Is this swelling a result of sexual arousal? She asked bluntly, her voice now laced with confusion. The man's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He opened his mouth to respond but seemed to reconsider, biting his lip instead. He shifted uncomfortably on the examination table, clearly realizing how difficult it was to explain this concept to someone who was fundamentally unable to grasp the notion of human sexuality. Yeah, he muttered, his eyes avoiding hers. That's kind of the idea. It's a biological response, like I said. Nothing wrong with it. Zlyra froze, her mind working overtime. She had encountered the concept of sexual arousal in various alien cultures before. However, those instances were often coupled with rituals or reproductive practices, not spontaneous physical reactions. She quickly reviewed her interactions with humans. The idea of sex, reproduction, and attraction had never been part of the medical files she had read. She simply wasn't equipped to understand it on a personal level. So you feel this physical swelling in response to what? Zlyra asked, her curiosity now overtaking her clinical detachment. You say it is normal for human males, but what causes it? The man groaned, clearly mortified. I'm not exactly sure how to say this, but when I see, things. Or think about things. Or sometimes when someone touches me. I don't know, okay? Zlyra's brain whirred, trying to comprehend the human experience of sexual arousal. She felt a strange pulse in the air, something she couldn't define. The emotional landscape surrounding this particular issue was complex, confusing, and unlike anything she had encountered before. Touch, Zlyra repeated. Is this physical touch causing the swelling? The human's face was crimson, and he nodded awkwardly. Sometimes, yeah. But it's not something I can control. Zlyra processed the information, still unsure how to proceed. She had never considered human attraction and physical responses in such a raw, unmediated form. She was trained to examine diseases and injuries, not desire. I see, she said finally, though her tone suggested she still didn't fully understand. So, this swelling is a natural response to stimuli. However, you are uncomfortable with it? The human sighed in relief. Yes. Exactly. It's not a problem, but it's uncomfortable, you know? I just wanted to make sure it's not some kind of medical issue. Like, I don't want to be taken to some alien planet and have them cut me open or something. Zlyra blinked, now fully understanding the source of the human's distress, not his body, but his cultural inhibition. The human seemed to equate natural bodily functions with shame and embarrassment, something that was foreign to her race. I can assure you, there is no need for intervention, Zlyra said, her tone softening ever so slightly. Your body's response is within the parameters of acceptable biological function. There is no danger. She paused, then added, however, I would recommend learning to manage it in a manner that is comfortable for you, as it appears to cause you distress. The man let out a deep sigh of relief. Okay. Good. Thanks. Zlyra nodded curtly, although she couldn't shake the curiosity that lingered. Something in the way the human had reacted to their conversation, his embarrassment, his discomposure, had made her question her understanding of not just human biology, but human relationships themselves. As she began to prepare her next steps, she couldn't help but wonder if she had missed something, or if, perhaps, there was more to this strange human condition than she could comprehend. Zlyra's patience, which had always been her most treasured trait, began to thin. She'd read every medical journal, every diagnostic report on human anatomy, but nothing in her education had prepared her for this. The human's reluctance to fully explain what was happening, combined with his increasingly erratic behavior, left her wondering if there was something deeper at play. What was so difficult about admitting to a medical issue? Human, she said, her voice stern but laced with an undercurrent of concern. I must insist on a full evaluation. You have sought medical assistance. It is my duty to assist you. The man's face turned a deeper shade of crimson, and he shifted uncomfortably on the examination table. It's just, I didn't think you'd be all serious about it. He scratched his neck, clearly at a loss for words. It's embarrassing, okay? I didn't come here to, get analyzed like some kind of experiment. Zlyra frowned, confused by his wording. What do you mean by experiment? Is it a matter of discomfort or… No, it's… He groaned, rubbing his forehead in frustration. I mean, it's a normal thing for humans, right? It happens sometimes. The swelling. But I guess you wouldn't understand because, well, you're not human. At last, the words clicked in Zlyra's mind. It wasn't a disease or injury. It wasn't even an issue she could treat in her usual way. He was talking about the human reproductive response. Something that was entirely alien to her. But instead of feeling triumphant, she only grew more perplexed. This was something normal. But why would he feel the need to hide it? She processed this new information quickly, trying to maintain her professional composure. Are you referring to the swelling caused by attraction? She asked cautiously. The human's jaw dropped, his eyes wide. Wait, you know about that? Zlyra tilted her head. I have read about human sexuality in medical databases, but it is not something I have experienced. Nor is it a condition I can treat. The man blinked rapidly, trying to suppress a laugh, though it was clear he was struggling with the absurdity of the situation. Okay, so you've read about it, but you don't get it. Yeah, that makes sense. Still, not exactly the thing you want to explain to a stranger, you know? A sharp beep from the diagnostic scanner interrupted the conversation, and Zlyra glanced over at the display. Nothing alarming appeared on the screen. The man's swelling wasn't a medical issue, after all. It was a physical response, totally normal, though awkward in this context. It dawned on her then, the human was not in need of medical treatment. He was simply in need of understanding, something that Zlyra was now struggling to provide. Human, she said slowly. I must admit that I do not fully understand this reaction. However, I have no reason to believe this swelling is a health concern. The man let out a nervous laugh, then stopped, seemingly realizing something. So, you're saying it's not dangerous? Correct. The swelling is simply a physiological response. It poses no immediate danger to your health. Well, that's a relief, he said, sounding both relieved and oddly disappointed. He rubbed his face with both hands. But, you still think it's weird, don't you? Zlyra hesitated, her 3 sets of eyes flickering between the man and the screen. I do not judge human. But this physiological response is something I am not familiar with in practical terms. It seems to be connected to your attraction, yes? The man's cheeks reddened again, but this time, there was a slight smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, I guess that's the part one didn't want to go into detail about. Zlyra tilted her head, a soft hum escaping her lips. In my culture, physical attraction is not something that causes such responses. We do not experience this form of swelling. The human's smile broadened as the tension began to ease between them. Yeah, I figured. But hey, now we're talking about it, maybe it's not so bad, right? Zlyra took a deep breath, trying to process the human's response. He seemed relaxed now, though the awkwardness between them still lingered. You should not feel embarrassed. I did not understand what you meant by swelling at first, but now I see that it is normal. The man chuckled, though there was a bit of lingering self-consciousness in his voice. Normal for humans, maybe. But I still didn't think you'd get it. I didn't even know how to explain it. You know, hey, I've got this thing happening down there. Kind of embarrassing. Slyra considered this for a moment. I can see how this may be uncomfortable. In my culture, we do not have such concerns about privacy. Physical condition is viewed objectively, with no shame attached. Well, lucky you, the human muttered, then looked her straight in the eye. So, what happens now? We just pretend this never happened? Slyra paused, considering this question. I believe it would be best for you to proceed as normal, human. Your physiological response is no different than any other biological function. His eyes widened again, and then he laughed, his tone lightening considerably. Yeah, well, I'm not gonna pretend it didn't happen. But maybe you could help me figure out how to make it stop when I don't want it to. Slyra raised an eyebrow, confused. Stop? Why would you want to stop it? The man cleared his throat, his earlier embarrassment resurfacing. You know, in situations where it's not, appropriate. Like during work or, public situations. Slyra thought this over carefully. I do not have a solution for this issue. It seems that it is a natural part of your physiology. I can only advise that you control your mental state to avoid such responses in inappropriate contexts. He stared at her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Thanks, though. I didn't think I'd be able to talk about this with anyone, let alone an alien nurse. Slyra nodded. You are welcome. And I have learned much about human physiology today. This has been informative. The human chuckled, the tension finally breaking. Well, I'm glad to have been of service. Maybe next time we can discuss something a little less personal. Slyra raised an eyebrow. If that is your preference. She paused, a small smile tugging at the edge of her lips. I suspect, human, that we could both benefit from a better understanding of each other's complexities. The man laughed again, his earlier discomfort gone, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. Yeah, I think we could. Who knows? Maybe next time you'll even be able to help me with other complications. Slyra's smile widened slightly, her 3 sets of eyes narrowing in amusement. Perhaps, human. Perhaps.